As the bitter wind howls through the forests of Norway and snow blankets the ancient land, villagers once spoke in hushed tones of a terrifying sight in the night sky. Åsgårdsreia. A ghostly cavalcade of the dead galloping through the black heavens on spectral horses. Their laughter was chilling, their cries mournful. To hear them was to be warned. To see them was to be cursed. This is not just legend, it is a shadow of Norse myth and Norwegian folklore, colliding in a storm of gods, ghosts, and the restless dead. Welcome to the story of Åsgårdsreia, the wild hunt of Norway. The legend of Åsgårdsreia is not merely a tale, it is a fusion of belief systems, evolving over centuries at the crossroads of myth, fear, and seasonal mystery. Its roots lie deep within Old Norse cosmology, a world teeming with gods, giants, and unseen forces. The Norse believed in multiple realms, Asgard, Midgard, Helheim, each connected by the great tree Yggdrasil. Among these realms, Asgard was the home of the Aesir, the chief gods like Odin, Thor, and Frigg. The name Åsgårdsreia literally means Asgard's ride, or the ride of the Aesir, suggesting a divine procession, perhaps even a celestial patrol from Odin himself. In wider Germanic and Anglo-Saxon traditions, this evolved into what was called the Wild Hunt, a spectral cavalcade led by Odin, storming through the night skies during winter. This terrifying vision was seen as a forewarning of war, plague, or death. But in Norway, the story took a darker, more folkloric twist. Instead of Odin leading the hunt, Norwegian folk belief often cast a woman named Lucy as the fearsome leader of Åsgårdsreia. Lucy, possibly derived from ancient fertility goddesses or from the Latin name Lucia, was transformed in the Christian era into a demonic figure, a witch-like being who punished those who broke sacred seasonal taboos. Riding at the front of the Phantom Army, Lucy was said to tear through the skies on December 13th, a date that later became associated with St. Lucia's Day, but once marked the winter solstice under the Julian calendar. Other tales describe the leader as a cursed soul, someone who had committed great sins in life, a murderer, an oath-breaker, or an unbaptized spirit, now condemned to lead the host of the damned through eternity. In some sagas and rural beliefs, the riders themselves were not gods but a ghostly retinue of the dead, souls denied peace, spirits forgotten by kin, or those buried outside consecrated ground. As Christianity spread across Scandinavia in the Middle Ages, the tale of Åsgårdsreia began to shift. Pagan gods became demons, sacred rites became forbidden superstitions. Yet the bones of the older myth remained intact, a powerful host that emerges in the deepest part of winter, when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. The Åsgårdsreia legend ultimately became a hybrid, mythic in scale, like the divine processions of Odin's warriors, folkloric in detail, grounded in the fears and customs of rural Norwegian life, Christian in interpretation, painting it as a parade of damned souls. And so Åsgårdsreia came to symbolize a kind of cosmic unrest, a reminder that during the long dark nights of winter, the world of the dead was never too far from the world of the living. But who are these ghostly riders that sweep across the heavens like a storm of death? The legends describe them as a chaotic, spectral army, a blend of the cursed, the forgotten, and the fallen. Leading the pack might be a god, a witch, or a damned soul, but those who follow are united by one trait: they have no rest and no peace. Many among Åsgårdsreia's ranks are said to be the unbaptized souls, infants who died before receiving the rites of the church, left to wander the earth, crying for the lives they never lived. In Norwegian folk belief, these spirits, called Utbird, were feared for their mournful wails and vengeful nature. Others were criminals, thieves, or traitors, those who had escaped mortal justice, only to be damned in death. Their sins bound them to the hunt, where they would be hunted themselves for eternity, their chains rattling in the cold wind as a warning to others. Then there are the warriors who died badly, without honor, without burial, or in betrayal. Denied entry into Valhalla, they became twisted echoes of the heroes they once were, now riding with Oscordsrea as ghostly soldiers, their weapons broken and their faces gaunt. Some say their eyes still glow with battle fury, others claim they weep silently as they ride. In some tales, the hunt is led by Odin, the All-Father himself, cloaked in shadow, riding his 8-legged horse Sleipnir. His single eye blazes with fury, and he commands the dead as a general command his troops. But in Norwegian folklore, Odin's role fades, replaced by Lucy, the terrifying witch of midwinter. A dark echo of Saint Lucia, she leads the hunt on Lucenat, the longest and most dangerous night of the year. With fire in her eyes and frost in her breath, she punishes those who dared to work, spin, or bake during forbidden hours of Yule. In some regions, the leader is described as a cursed mortal, a once proud noble or hunter who defied the gods and was condemned to ride forever, never touching the ground again. Witnesses never saw the riders clearly. Instead, they heard them, long before they arrived. The distant howling of black spectral hounds, their eyes burning like embers. The pounding of ghostly hooves overhead, shaking the very earth. The chilling sound of horns and laughter, twisted and hollow, as though echoing from the realm of the dead. To see Oscordsrea was to invite misfortune. Travelers caught on the roads during a hunt were said to be swept into the procession, trapped in a spectral spiral of endless riding. The unlucky might return days later, dazed and broken, unable to speak of what they had seen. Others never returned at all. And worst of all, some became part of the hunt themselves, joining its ranks in death and doom, bound to the skies forevermore. The wild hunt of Oscordsrea was not a legend for all seasons. It belonged to the dark, the frozen stillness of midwinter, when the night stretched longest and the veil between the living and the dead wore thin. This was the season of Yule, the ancient Norse solstice festival. A time of fire, feasting, and the honoring of ancestral spirits. But also a time when unseen forces stirred, and the old gods, or something darker, returned to the skies. The hunt was said to ride most fiercely during the 12 nights of Yule, from the winter solstice around December 21st to early January. This period was sacred in Norse and Germanic traditions. Not only did it mark the rebirth of the sun, but it was also believed to be a time when the world was suspended, when time stood still and supernatural beings could cross freely into our realm. In some versions of the tale, the most dangerous night of all was Lucenat, Lucy's night, falling on December 13th, the old solstice date. That was when Lucy herself was said to fly out with her wild hunt to punish the disobedient and the impure. The procession of Oscordsrea was not bound to any road or path. They swept down from the snow-covered mountains, soared across wind-blasted fjords, and thundered over frozen valleys. Villagers claimed they traveled through the air, but their hooves could be heard overhead, pounding like thunder. Their spectral presence left behind no footprints, only cracked branches, dead birds, and silence. Certain places were feared more than others. Forest clearings where no grass grew, old crossroads once used for executions, and abandoned farms left to rot after tragic deaths. These were the haunts of the wild hunt. There were signs, omens that warned people the hunt was nearby. Thunder in winter, unnatural and sudden, was not seen as weather, but as hooves pounding the sky. The northern lights, or aurora borealis, were seen not as a natural wonder, but the reflected armor and ghostly weapons of the spectral riders. Some claimed the lights flickered faster when the hunt passed overhead. Others believed that if you heard dogs howling in the distance, and they answered no living master, it was the hounds of Oscordsrea on the scent of a new soul. The tale of Oscordsrea was not just a fireside story, it was a threat taken seriously. And over generations, the people developed rituals, superstitions, and safeguards to defend themselves from the wild hunt that stalked the skies. The home was the first line of defense. Doors and windows were not merely shut at night, they were sealed with old rites and symbols. Tar, black and bitter-smelling, was smeared across doorframes and windowsills to deter spirits and confuse the ghostly hounds. Iron nails or scissors, symbols of human craft and protection, were placed beneath the doorstep or hung behind the door. A cross, whether carved into wood or formed from straw, was fixed above the lintel to ward off evil. In some valleys, sprigs of rowan tree, a sacred plant in Norse and later Christian folklore, were tucked above barn doors to protect livestock, which were also at risk during the hunt's passing. Although the wild hunt was said to be loud and terrifying, human noise became dangerous during this time. People were warned: no singing, no whistling, no playing instruments after nightfall during Yule. Laughter, especially mocking laughter, was strictly forbidden. For it was believed that if the hunt heard such disrespect, they would not pass by, they would enter. Instead, bells were used sparingly and with purpose. A single, sharp ring of a consecrated bell, often a small handbell blessed by a priest, could drive away evil spirits, including the riders of Åsgårdsreia. Some homes rang bells at sunset to mark the beginning of night and ward off any roaming spirits. One of the most universally respected rules was stillness and silence. When the air grew too quiet, when dogs cowered, when the wind changed suddenly and an unnatural sound rose from the forest, that was the moment to stop. Everyone, young and old, was taught to lie still, lower their gaze, and say nothing. To look out the window, to peek behind a curtain, to venture onto the threshold, was to invite disaster. If you merely heard the hunt, its howling, its thunder, its ghostly horns, but resisted the urge to look, you might be spared. But to see it, to witness the faces of the dead, was another matter entirely. Protection was not always an individual effort, it was a community affair. Village elders would remind children of the old taboos each winter. Bells were rung from chapels or watchtowers at twilight, and symbols were carved into boundary stones, reminding travelers where the safe world ended and the wild, haunted lands began. Families gathered early by the hearth, food was shared, prayers were whispered, and once the storm winds howled, no one left their home. Because everyone knew, the wild hunt respected neither the holy nor the humble. It respected only fear. In these old protections, we see more than superstition. We see the voice of survival. We see a culture shaped by long winters, harsh landscapes, and the deep-rooted belief that something greater, something wilder, still stalked the land when the stars disappeared. And so they watched, and waited, and prayed. The hunt would pass them by. Åsgårdsreia is a cultural mirror, reflecting deep-rooted fears, ancient beliefs, and the evolving worldview of the Norwegian people. It is myth wrapped in memory, legend shaped by survival. At its heart, the wild hunt is a story of collision, a violent meeting of opposites, order and chaos, life and death, and the sacred and the profane. In Norse cosmology, order, represented by the gods of Asgard, constantly struggles to hold back chaos, embodied by the giants, the underworld, and Ragnarok itself. The wild hunt disturbs this balance, a chaotic intrusion into the human world by spirits that no longer obey the rules of life, death, or divine law. It reminds us that not everything can be controlled, that even in the season of light returning Yule, the darkness can rise up and ride once more. For the pre-Christian Norse, fate, Orlog, was an invisible force that shaped every life, from gods to mortals. Åsgårdsreia can be seen as a manifestation of fate, sudden, unavoidable, and beyond mortal comprehension. The hunt is not evil in the way later Christian lore might describe it. It is wild, unbound, and primordial, a storm of the past colliding with the present. It does not choose victims based on morality, but by proximity and timing. To be caught in its path is not always a punishment. It is a result of being in the wrong place when the old forces awaken. Åsgårdsreia rides during Yule, the liminal space between years, between light and darkness. Much like the Celtic Samhain or the Christian All Souls' Night, Yule was a time of ancestral visitation, of honoring the dead, and recognizing that the unseen world presses close. The wild hunt is a spectral procession, not just of the damned, but of forgotten souls, of unfulfilled oaths, of the unresolved. It reminds us that the dead are never entirely gone, and that the past, especially a violent or unjust one, continues to echo. To folklorists and anthropologists, Åsgård's Raya also serves as a powerful symbolic warning. It enforces a code of seasonal behavior. Do not work after dark during sacred nights, respect silence, observe rituals of protection, and honor the stillness of winter. Those who broke these taboos by spinning, baking, or traveling were not just inviting the hunt, they were violating the cosmic order. In this way, the story served as a communal memory, reinforcing the rhythms of the year and the wisdom of respecting nature's cycles. Even today, the hunt can be seen as a metaphor for what happens when we ignore balance, push beyond limits, or dismiss the sacred in favor of convenience. With the arrival of Christianity in Scandinavia, old beliefs were not simply erased, they were transformed. Odin's divine warband became a demonic horde. Sacred Yule customs were reframed as pagan threats. Lucy, once perhaps a fertility or winter goddess, became a monstrous figure punishing sinful behavior. In this Christianized form, Åsgård's Raya was no longer a manifestation of fate, it became a morality tale, a warning to remain devout and obedient, lest the damned come for you. Yet beneath this overlay, the old truths still whisper. Ultimately, Åsgård's Raya taps into one of humanity's oldest and most primal fears: to be alone in the wilderness when something greater and more terrible is on the move. To be small beneath the sky, under a force you cannot understand or stop. To be caught outside, vulnerable, when death rides the wind. That fear still lingers, even now, in the storm winds, in the shifting lights of the aurora, in the silence that follows a sudden gust. For the wild hunt has never truly stopped. It rides in our stories, in our symbols, and in the fragile boundary we all carry, between what is seen and what is still waiting in the dark. Though born from ancient roots and winter-bound whispers, the legend of Åsgård's Raya, Norway's wild hunt, has not faded into the frost of forgotten lore. Instead, it has ridden its way into the heart of modern culture, inspiring generations of artists, musicians, writers, and storytellers who continue to draw from its haunting power. Like the hunt itself, it refuses to rest. One of the most visible echoes of the wild hunt in modern literature appears in the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. His vision of the ringwraiths, the Nazgul, cloaked riders that pursue the living across land and sky, owes a clear debt to the terrifying image of a spectral cavalcade on horseback. Tolkien, a scholar of Norse mythology and Old English literature, was deeply familiar with the pan-European variations of the wild hunt, including Norway's Åsgård's Raya. Later fantasy authors like Susan Cooper, Terry Pratchett, and Andrzej Sapkowski, creator of the Witcher series, have also drawn from the imagery and lore of the hunt. In Sapkowski's universe, the wild hunt is a band of spectral elves who ride between worlds, abducting souls and foretelling doom, directly echoing Åsgård's Raya's role in folklore. In music, the wild hunt theme has found a home across genres. In the Romantic period, composers such as Franz Liszt wrote orchestral pieces like La Chasse Sauvage, The Wild Hunt, capturing the fury and chaos of the spectral riders through frenzied strings and thundering percussion. In modern Norway and Scandinavia, the hunt has become a powerful motif in black metal and Nordic folk metal. Bands like Wardruna, Goat, and Dimmu Borgir invoke the primal force of Åsgård's Raya through ancient instruments, guttural chants, and lyrics drawn directly from Old Norse poems and local legend. Album covers often depict riders cloaked in frost and shadow, storming through pine forests beneath the northern lights, a visual resurrection of Norway's ghostly hunt. In recent decades, Åsgård's Raya has influenced not only books and music, but also film, television, and video games. Scandinavian horror films and TV dramas often tap into the eerie tension of winter folklore, where isolated villages and icy landscapes become the perfect stage for spectral threats. Shows like Ragnarok and Netflix subtly echo the presence of ancient Norse spirits, while more directly folkloric shows like Norsemen or Vikings include references to Odin's ride and spectral omens. In video games, the wild hunt appears most prominently in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where the antagonists are ghostly warriors who chase the protagonist across dimensions, bearing all the marks of Åsgård's Raya: death, winter, and the collapse of order. But perhaps most significantly, Åsgårdsreia has been preserved in the oral traditions and seasonal customs of Norway itself. In winter festivals, especially in rural communities, children still hear the warnings: stay inside, be silent when the wind howls, and don't mock what rides in the dark. Storytellers, folk museums, and Yule reenactments across the country keep the tale alive. Groups perform dramatic representations of the hunt during midwinter festivals, complete with ghostly masks, ringing bells, and blazing torches. These traditions are not just performances. They are acts of remembrance, connecting modern Norwegians to their ancestors and to the spiritual rhythm of the seasons. In the modern world, lit by electric lights and ruled by science, it might seem easy to dismiss a tale like Åsgårdsreia. But the hunt endures because it speaks to something deeper. The untamed power of nature, the thin boundary between life and death, and the mystery that still lies in winter's silence. Åsgårdsreia remains a symbol of the season's wildness, of ancestral memory, and of the fear that even in the safety of our homes, something ancient might still ride the skies when the wind begins to howl. When winter deepens and the last warmth flees the land, when the wind begins to scream through the fjords and snow falls heavy enough to swallow the stars, that is when the old world stirs. The fire may crackle in the hearth, the doors may be locked, but still the darkness outside presses in, cold and ancient. And if you hear it, the distant pounding of hooves, the howl of dogs that aren't there, the faint blast of a ghostly horn through the blizzard, remember the old ways. Stay inside, respect the silence. Do not sing, do not spin, do not call out. For it is said that Åsgårdsreia rides still, not in books or dreams, but in the living breath of Norway's winter. Sweeping through the pine forests, over snowbound peaks, through frozen valleys, a storm of the forgotten, the damned, the restless dead. It is more than myth. It is a warning, passed down from a time when the skies were alive with gods and mortals still feared the wild. And so, when the stars vanish behind snow-filled skies, when the night grows unnaturally still, do not look up, do not follow, for some riders still seek company, and some stories never stop riding.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.